Hi, Micaela. How are you?
Thank you so much. So good to be here.
Yeah, unfortunately, you cannot be with us here in Cologne, but I'm glad that you could take the time and talk with us now, like a little Q&A session.
For
So
us next year.
yes. For everybody in the stream who's watching online, of course, there is a chat. If you haven't found it yet, there is, of course, a chat. And you can post your questions to Michaela in the chat, and I will try to ask everything that you have on your mind. So, my first question to you, Michaela, is do you know by heart how many memes do you have in your presentation?
That's the question to start. Never have enough that. Thank you so much. I don't know. And all of those memes, just I think one or two are made by me. I love making memes. I think it's my love letter to the internet, my way of expressing things. And weirdly, I think it's like in ancient Egypt, when you kind of like codified an idea into an image, when for memes are like that. So I'm super glad that you enjoyed them.
Yes. There were also some memes that I didn't know yet, so a level up on that for me too. So let's look at the chat. Or maybe another first question from my side, because it may be a too bold question, even after your session, but I think many people still struggle to really find a definition for the metaverse because it has so many aspects and so many features and so many ideas. But do you think it's possible to give like a one sentence definition of what the metaverse is or could be?
An academic for just one liner of a definition, it's like impossible task. But I think if you have to sum it up in just one word, it would be conversions. Because you are seeing a lot of different technologies conversion. And one of the interesting aspects of maybe, because it's as you were well saying, it's like a multi-layer definition, because you have an integration of technologies, an integration of public and private interest, and integration of social media, video games. And I think it's like this multicultural object. And it's interesting because if you go back to the 90s and try to define what the internet was at that moment, we neither have that definition. So it's like evolving, but if you take a photo of this moment, it's like the convergence of all of these digital technologies and how are we going to relate to them. And one interesting thing is that people tend to think about the metaverse as virtual reality. And Neil Stephenson there are a lot of course, he is big on definitions and explaining what the metaverse is. But one interesting thing was in one of his tweets when he was saying that when he wrote Snow Crash, he didn't have gaming in mind because gaming was just still blooming, was just still starting. So he sees gaming as a gateway to the metaverse also, but in AR, thinking just in screens, in flat screens, not just only virtual reality.
Yeah, just a quick technical thing. I think the sound of your microphone is not so great yet. So I would ask you, Michaela, to just end the call and then join back, and I hope then the quality is better. So I see you in a second.
Sure.
So fingers crossed. I hope Michaela is back. Yeah.
Here we are.
Oh,
Yes.
and the sound is so much better.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think the little gremlin had something to do.
Yeah, maybe sucked on the cable. Okay, so Michaela, there are some questions in the chat, but maybe my colleagues can scroll a bit because it scrolled away. The question I wanted to read out loud is now somewhere. Can you scroll up? Yeah. No, where is it now?
How many hours do you have in Baldur's Gate? Over 300.
A lot of people. The question, there's the question from Pat Pat. How did you get into the metaverse topic and AI ethics? How did it start for you?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I'm a huge fan of Mass Effect. huge fan of Mass Effect. I used to do cosplay, and I remember when I was playing Mass Effect, there was this quote by Legion, one of the characters, which was an android. And the thing is that it says, does this unit have a soul? And for me, that was like a really deep philosophical question, thinking about sentience, thinking about AI ethics. And that's how I started doing research. And going into the metaverse, it's always, I have always been curious about culture, about immersive spaces. And it was these natural conversions of intellectual property, all the things that I love, gaming, social media. I have a background on internet governance. So it's like all things coming together, which is interesting because before that, I had a really hard time to explain to people what I do, what I research, and how things connect. So I think in my case, it's also a conversions too.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of Mass Effect too, so I totally get that. Generally, it feels like as a science fiction fan, and you also had like Star Trek references in your presentation. Does it feel for you like somehow we have arrived in the future and things that were just pure science fiction back when we were child are now just really daily business and reality for us.
Absolutely. Star Trek is also a huge inspiration for me, and particularly when it comes to thinking about post scarcity societies. There is this fantastic book from a French economist that's called Manu Sadia. The book is called Treconomics, and tries to kind of like investigate and research about how can we imagine a post-scarcity society. And it's interesting because when we are moving from the physical world to the digital world, we see this possibility. We can see at some point like generative AI, like something akin to the replicators that we had in Star Trek. And I remember as a copyright nerd watching The Next Generation and some episodes thinking about how they share content and how they're going to give movies to other cultures. This was a good episode in Voyager. That they were going to give like the whole amount of movies from Earth to other cultures, and it's interesting because that means there is no copyright. There is no, it's not a thing. That's why I love that quote from Picard, because I feel like some of our regulations come from a world that's different now and challenging us to revisit the rationales and the philosophical justification for that kind of frameworks.
Yes, copyright is. I think it's already a complicated topic even before the metaverse and new technologies. As a journalist, I know about that. And I think what we also have to consider is that copyright is handled differently in every country in the world. And the question is now, how fast can each country like rework the copyright law, adjust it to current technologies and developments, especially when we talk about AI? So, what's your, as a lawyer, what's your experience? How many, and we talk about years, right? How many years do we have to wait for copyright laws to adjust to the reality that we now live in?
Well, I think we are far two layers to this question, because one thing is that copyright law is different in each country, but at the same time, we have frameworks because of global treaties. So there are things that are really similar between countries. So you have like a kind of like a global standard among some countries, and then local differences in how they apply kind of like the same principles. It's like really complicated. We used to show that the answer that a copyright lawyer is going to give you is it depends, because really it's really fact intensive and you're going to have to consider a lot of things. But for me, is that something we are kind of like carrying on from the 90s, like when we're starting to see like the commercial internet and how things are changing. For example, when software started, they didn't know how to put it within. Sorry, she wanted to go. They didn't know how to kind of like classify it within copyright law, so it ended like being classified as a literary work, because it has like the expressive elements of the creativity of how you write your software, how you write your code. but it doesn't answer some questions about the functionality, for example, of the code, which is not protected under copyright law. So I don't want to go like really, really deep into this, but for me, this kind of like gap between how technologies are evolving and how copyright is adapting is like widening, and it exploded with AI because it kind of like questions a lot of principles. Can machines be creative? How we define originality? How are we going to protect or not the products and the works being created by machines? And it's interesting because you have autonomous, you can think about autonomous creations, just pure machine creating, but also assisted creation of works with AI. So it's a really, really dense question and multi-layered.
Yes, but thank you though for trying to give it quite a short answer. I know you could probably talk about that for hours. We have a
Yes.
question in the chat from Macuso. Is AI art derived art, and how is it different from how artists are inspired by other people's art?
Wow, that's a great question. I love because one of the things I try to reach out to people is that the narratives that are being told around AI art is like the same arguments we see with photography and like saying that photography is not real art, the same arguments we saw with video games, like this whole question about how video games are not art, which we know is completely false. And the same is happening with AI art. And when you are thinking about if it is derivative or not, the thing is that you have, when you talk about AI, you have to start like opening the box and seeing what is inside. And not every AI is the same, not every model is the same, not every model uses the same technique, not every model uses the same training data set. So it's going to depend of all of these questions. And it's interesting because the question for me, and it's a really good question, is like it's a problem of scale. Because when you see humans going to a museum and being inspired, uh, is it's kind of like that framework when things go into your brain. We cannot open your brain for now to see how you process that information and how those elements are integrating into the new work you are creating. But with machines, with AI, we have a lot of really complex and really huge, humongous neural networks that you cannot understand how the weights connect and how all the things integrate to see this result. One thing is, when I was doing my research, one of the data sets had over 6 billion training images. And I was looking for data, and 6 billions were the population of the world in the 90s. So it's like saying like every person in the world working in the 90s had a copyright interest on one image, because all of these images were being used to train a system. So it's really hard to trace back if they are derivative or not.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're running a little bit out of time. I could talk to you like for hours, as I already said, Micaela. So thank you so much for taking the time for the extra Q&A and for this interview. And I hope to see you in person next year. And so we continue with the next session on the main stage, and therefore we also switched back to German, denn gleich folgt dort das Panel Games Standort Nummer 1. Wie gelingt Deutschlands Aufholjagd? Mit dabei sind unter anderem Nathanael Liminski, unser von der NRW-Staatskanzlei, und auch Franziska Giffey von der SPD Berlin, Fabian Mehring, Freie Wähler Bayern, Michael Kellner vom Bundeswirtschaftsministerium, und moderiert wird das Ganze von Frauke Holzmeier. Gleich geht's dort los. Ich sage erstmal hier Tschüss, wir sehen uns gleich wieder.